Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm Michael Sadler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to change your beliefs and regain your health, then do we have the MindBody Self Show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Mario Martinez, licensed clinical neuropsychologist and the best-selling author of The Man from Autumn, The Mind-Body Code, and his latest, The MindBody Self. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about biocognitive science and how to change the beliefs that limit your health, longevity, and success. That, plus we'll talk about mal de ojo, texting at dinner, butterflies and sneezing oxen, Michael Jordan and college gym shorts, elementary school spelling bees, and why in the world black sheep get such a raw deal. So welcome to the show, Mario. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and a mighty woohoo! So before we dive right into things, how did your culture shape you growing up?
Well, I grew up in a Spanish-French culture and some Cuban. And so it's really multicultural. And I didn't know that there was such a culture or this a thing as a culture until I moved to New York to an Irish neighborhood. And one day I said to my mother, well, I think I'd like to dye my hair blonde because I think that would be cool. My mother said, if you want to look like a clown, go ahead. So that was the first time that I realized that I was different than other people in some ways, and that difference had all kinds of social implications. Later, as I studied what I've done, I found out that it's not only social implications, but biological implications of what the culture does to you, good and bad.
So, and how did you get interested then in neuropsychology itself?
I started with clinical psychology, and the neuropsychology was very interesting to me because that's when the MRI was coming out, and you could actually see what the brain was doing without opening up the brain. And we began to map, rather than what we did initially, which is mapping the pathology. What happens when you have a tumor here? What happens when you have a trauma there? We were beginning to see what are the potentials of the brain? What can the brain do when it's healthy? And what are the horizons of the brain? And that to me became very important. And later, I brought in culture, and now cultural neuroscience is very big. But my mentor was George Solomon. He was a pioneer, one of the beginnings in psychoneuroimmunology. And but I think what happens, and the next step that I want to take psychoneuroimmunology is I want to call it cultural psychoneuroimmunology, because it's not only how the mind and the body communicate with each other, but it's in a cultural context. It's never in a vacuum, never out of the context of culture.
So, and that's where we're going to go today. But before we do that, I was fascinated. You worked as a correctional psychologist in a maximum security prison. What were you learning there?
Well, I was learning the worst of humanity, but also the resilience of humanity. There were people there that, without exaggeration, that were just a slightly better than a wild animal. And there were some people there that were for the wrong reasons or with an opportunity to change their lives. So I really learned the spectrum of human quality. And I also learned a tremendous amount of clinical psychology, self-mutilators, and all kinds of things that you see in places only that are that dark. And I was there for 3 years, and I thought that was enough. Wrote a couple of papers about self-mutilation and things like that, and addictions. I worked on addictions quite a bit. We developed the first psychiatric program for a maximum security facility in the country. This is in Tennessee, and I was the director of treatment. So it's great experience. But I wanted to move on to work with people who are in a different place, who are not necessarily incarcerated, who are incarcerated by their minds and their culture. So I went from an actual physical prison to the biocognitive prison that I call, which is people living in a fishbowl, not knowing that the fishbowl is the culture that's containing them.
So thank you for sharing in that. I'm in near one forest fire. There's another forest fire not too far off. I'm in Basalt, Colorado, and we're socked in smoke. And you can't tell if everywhere around you is in the smoke or just you are in the smoke because we're stuck in a fishbowl. We can't see beyond it. What is the fishbowl of our mind that we don't even realize that we're stuck in?
Well, the best way to understand culture is to see that our brain is culturally bound. It's not programmed. We're not machines, but it's designed to adjust to a culture, just like it's designed to adjust to a language. So if you look at the world as having multiple potential to be interpreted, and the culture will create and will weave a fabric around the world, and that's what the brain will see. We'll see the fabric, which is the world that it created. And the culture basically is, the way that I define it, is the collective beliefs of important things in life. The collective beliefs about ethics, aesthetics, wellness, the morality of the individual. And interestingly, I believe that the immune system is moral, and I can talk about that later. But the immune system responds to morality that has been absorbed by the culture.
So, okay, we've got to go there. And it's interesting that you're talking about culture and cultural beliefs. I just had on Don Miguel Ruiz about a week and a half ago of 4 Agreements. And he was talking about how it's our cultural beliefs that domesticate us, that basically produce a government in our minds that keeps us locked into a set of beliefs, what we can, what we can't do, what's good for us, what's bad for us. And now you're taking this and extending this all the way to our health and now our immune system. What does it mean that the immune system has, say that again. How did you say that?
That the immune system responds to the collective beliefs that we assimilate and that the culture teaches us. If you talk to a reductionist scientist and you say, look, the immune system responds to morals and responds to words, they say, well, that's ridiculous. How can words, which are some abstraction, affect the cells? Well, if you look at it that way, yes, it makes no sense. But let me give you the developmental process, and you'll see that you'll get it immediately. We're born with a susceptibility, with a propensity to pay attention to the people that are going to take care of us, what I call the culture editors. You're born, and as soon as you're born, you're hungry. You have a physiology that has immunological, endocrinological, and nervous response. Then, since we're programmed, or not programmed, we're designed to pay attention to those people that could take care of us, we see a breast or we see a bottle, and then you satiate that hunger, and the physiology changes. Your immune system changes, your nervous system changes, the endocrine system changes. You don't have a language. It's precognitive. But later, you have a language, and you say, oh, that's mother, that's breast, that's bottle. But you already have an embodied psychoneuroimmunology of the situation. So it becomes a biosymbol. It becomes a symbol because it's already been there waiting for that cognition. And I'll give you a specific example. We know now that when you shame someone, it causes inflammation. It causes the immune system to secrete molecules of pro-inflammatory molecules like tumor necrosis factor and interleukins. How is that possible? How can the immune system be responding to a word just as it would to some kind of pathogen? Because it became biosymbolic. And the reason it became biosymbolic is that animals have epigenetics, a lot of epigenetics. You can teach a rat to avoid, let's say, for example, a poison, and that rat, when it grooms another rat, neither of the rat will ever eat the poison again. But epigenetically, they pass on to another generation of their pups. That's epigenetics. Yeah. We lost a lot of that because we have language now. We develop consciousness and language. We can say, don't touch that, don't eat that, that's poison. But what happened, though, in order to compensate for that, the immune system had to become symbolic as well. It had to not only pay attention to a lion, but for you to say, a lion is coming. So it became biosymbolic, biolinguistic, and that makes it easier to understand why we have these reactions. If I look at somebody and I smile at that person, and that person smiles back, secrete oxytocin, which is a chemical that actually causes bonding, and it causes pro-social behavior, admiration, all of that. So if you look at it as biosymbolically, then the theory becomes very clear and very practical.
So if we take shame and we put shame into the immune system, what happens when we do something that culturally causes us shame?
Well, the cultures will keep you within the fishbowl. They have to keep you within the fishbowl to collectively work for each other. It comes way back from the pail, within the pail, which is the enclosure. You didn't want to go beyond the pail, but that's how civilization evolved, getting out of the pail. So what happens is they try to keep you within in a very, very subtle way. You're wounded 3 ways. You're either wounded with abandonment, with shame, or with betrayal when you leave the collective consciousness or the collective tribe or the physical tribe. And then that brings you back into the tribe because you've been shamed back into the tribe. This is why people who come from humble backgrounds and they become multimillionaires overnight, it's never overnight, but let's say country music or other kind of music, they come back home at first they're the heroes, but after a while it's like, so you don't have time for us. So now you're in Nashville with all the country music people and you don't have time for us. And they shame you back either with failure or coming back as someone who should not accept their greatness or should not accept their abundance. So now I've done some work clinically. The question is, if we're wounded in three ways and each of them has a psychoneurological response, the one that's been studied the most is shame. So what would be anti-inflammatory? And what I found is that honor consciousness is anti-inflammatory. That's why I work with fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis and MS and other inflammatory kinds of illnesses. But it's not intellectual. You can't just say, I'm going to be honorable. You have to have techniques, and that's what I explain in the book, The MindBody Self, of embodying that consciousness, and then your immune system begins to respond anti-inflammatorily.
How is it that we get this anti-inflammatory response going?
Well, if shame is inflammatory, the antidote for shame I found clinically, and we're going to begin to test it now immunologically to see actually what's going on, but I have seen reduction in inflammation, reduction in symptoms when you use honor, because honor is what I call one of the exalted emotions, one of the exalted or the higher cognitions. Shame is based on fear. It's one of the more primitive. And immunologically, we have developed to have physiology for the higher emotions and physiology for the lower emotions. The lower emotions, all they can do is create alarm. Cortisol, norepinephrine, and all these other things that actually is fight or flight. The upper emotions were not studied till recently because we were studying stress. Well, what about the opposite of stress? What about the admiration? What about the other emotions that have to do with love? Well, now that we're studying that, we can see that there's a psychoneuroimmunology that's very evolved, and the immune system loves that kind of evolvement. It's not the survival of the fittest, because if you were the fittest, you have the best health, and you don't. People that are angry and aggressive, they don't have very good health. So it's not a Darwinian thing. It's something much more beyond that.
So let's go there for a minute. First off, how do you define honor?
Honor is behavior that doesn't require an audience for you to feel proud of what you did. Something that you did, you feel good about it. In fact, honor has a posture. Your shoulders come out. Shame has a posture like this. So down and up. If you do something that you consider to be what I call the rightness of the moment, you do what's right. You do what is compassionate, what is without necessarily having to have an applause or an audience. This is why you see a lot of people that are considered heroes. You jumped into the ocean and you save that child. They usually say, well, I was there and I had to do it. It's that kind of humbleness. That's what honor is. And honor is a behavior that enhances admiration. Because if you see someone as being honorable, you want to admire that person. You want to imitate that person. So it's very pro-social. And the immune system loves pro-social functions, not fight or flight.
Beautiful. And then along those lines, when we're talking about anti-inflammatory and honor, we're talking about this person jumping into the ocean. It sounds like a lot of the anti-inflammatory response comes when we're helping others.
It does. And I'll give you an example. There was actually reported in one of the psychiatric journals about how we interpret pain. If you, for example, are living in a tenement where you know that you're getting ripped off by the owners, and the stairs haven't been taken care of, and you fall and you break your leg, you're going to have more pain. You're going to need more analgesics. It's going to take longer for it to heal than if you jump into the ocean and you break your leg to save a child. So the process is totally different. The biology is different. The healing process is different because it's a higher emotion. So the immune system goes with the elevation of the emotion. It doesn't stay in fight or flight like most people think. Even researchers, well, fight or flight is what we're going to look at. No. In fact, the research that was done with shame, they looked at shame and guilt. And they used the usual parameters of cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine to look at fight or flight. And then they also added, this is when they discovered that it's an inflammatory, they added molecules that mark the pro-inflammatory reaction of the immune system responding. So what happened is that they had people write for 15 minutes about guilt,
Yeah.
and another group about shame. The people with guilt had no inflammatory response, very little. The people with shame had high levels of inflammatory and not so much norepinephrine. So if you hadn't added that component of inflammation, you would have concluded, look, shame is not a problem because it has no fight or flight response. Guilt is worse, and it's the other way around. Shame is worse because every single illness is associated with inflammation, from cancer to fibromyalgia. They're all.
What is the biological or the cultural importance of shame pulling us down? Why was this wired into our genetics?
Because it's a way to stop you. When you didn't have the higher cognitions and so forth, it's a way to stop you from going away and leaving the tribe. Because if you leave the tribe, eventually the elderly die and the children die. So it's a protective process. But since our consciousness evolved, then it's no longer needed. There are other things that are more important than shame. Now, shame is good if it gets you to see something that was done to you that you want to fix, or even envy, but it's not an emotion to be kept chronically because it makes you sick. It's not an emotion that you want to cultivate. You want to cultivate the other emotion. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to sit around and be a doormat. In fact, one of the causes of health, which is what I work with, is righteous anger. Righteous anger is good for the immune system. What does that mean? Responding with anger when someone violates your innocence or your goodwill or the innocence or the goodwill of another child. Within context, it's actually very healthy for the immune system. George Solomon was able to show that. Now, if you take that out of context and you're angry, thinking that you're righteously angry, it's chronic anger. It's no longer good for you.
So so righteous anger is a way of protecting ourselves, protecting our tribe, protecting someone we love. Is that what it is?
Yes. And also being appropriately angry when someone is invading your privacy, when somebody is actually predatory with you, it's necessary. The immune system requires that because you have to protect yourself. In fact, people that don't protect themselves are sick. They allow things to happen to them. The caretakers that let other people abuse them, they're not in good health.
It sounds like it's coming right back around to the word honor, in this case, honoring thyself.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say that Aristotle, way back, 300 years before Christ or more, he said that hedonism was not enough, that hedonism, living in life for pleasure, that's not enough, that you have to have more. And he called it the eudaimonic. You mean good, and daimonic, the soul or the spirit. And he said that the good life is pleasure with meaning, pleasure with service, and pleasure with honor. Now, 2,800 years later, there is a major study that was done that you won't see it anywhere. It's in some kind of obscure journal. And they looked at the difference between the hedonic type of person and the eudaimonic type of person. And what they measured, look how interesting, how precise the immune system can be. There's something called CTRA, which is a set of 21 genes that respond to adversity. Some respond with viral defense, others with antibodies, and others anti-inflammatory. They measure the CTRAs of the hedonic and the eudaimonic, and they found that the eudaimonic had better CTRA than the hedonic. Interestingly, though, when you look subjectively, they both groups had the same level of pleasure, but the immune system could discern even though the pleasure was the same. That's incredible.
I love it. To me, it's what we've had so many guests on the show recently about us all coming together, about us interconnectivity, large C for consciousness, about how there's a wiring in the fabric ourselves, almost like a wiring in the fabric of time and space that is a reward mechanism for us working together and helping each other.
Yes, but more for the survival of the species, for meaning. Because, for example, Darwinians will say kind of in a posteriori way after the fact. Oh, this is to save the species. So if we started burying people when consciousness really began, oh, they were burying people because for hygiene reasons, so they could keep their genes healthy. If they didn't bury them, well, they moved away so they could move. There's always an explanation. It's hard to explain. Why would a 15-year-old boy risk his life to save an 80-year-old man? How is that going to pass on the genes? It's, again, honor and meaning. So it's not just passing on the genes. It's the meaning that you have in your life is what responds well with your health.
Beautiful. So let's go from meaning and shame, and let's talk about one of the other challenges, which is dread, or maybe we'll talk about existential dread.
Yes. Well, Kierkegaard talked about that quite a bit. He said that the existential anxiety, for example, is when you're dealing with bodily things. I'm anxious about a job. I'm anxious about being late. Bodily things. When you get out of the body, then it goes into an existential anguish, because the body cannot respond to transcendentals. And what he suggested is that you make the leap of faith into the transcendental. And the new book that I'm writing now, it's a novel, so I can get away from having to prove everything, is about what I call the Phoenix self. Mm-hmm. From the work that I've done with centenarians who live 100, I'm coming up with a fantasy that there are people around who are 300-400 years old, like Methuselah. So it's in search of Methuselah. And one of the things that these mentors teach the protagonist of the novel is that he has to learn and he has to find a cosmology so he can get his fear of death away and his fear of love. So whatever cosmology it is, I am here and my consciousness will go on and I'll meet with the people that I love, with angels, whatever, or I'm going to be food for the worms. It doesn't matter. You get out of the way, you get your fear of death out, and then you propose what you're going to be doing in your life with meaning. You have to do that, and we don't do that. We run away from those things, and we don't look at our mortality, and we don't look at a transcendentalism.
So if we looked at, and you did a lot of research with centenarians, if you look at them and you say, how have you dealt with the fear of death? What would they tell you?
Not one of them is afraid of death that I've talked to, and I've interviewed hundreds of them. Yeah. And it's not genetics. As a neuropsychologist, I thought, well, they even call it the Methuselah gene and this gene and that gene. Genetics accounts for only 20%, 25 at most. The rest is biocultural. They all have a cosmology. There are very few atheists. There are some. Most of them are not necessarily religious, but they have a spiritual belief, or they have some kind of belief that gets them out of their narcissism, that there's something in the world beyond me. It could be nature, it could be universe, it could be God, it could be whatever, but some global picture that it just doesn't end here. Even if you end as food for the worms, it doesn't end. But the point is to have this transcendentalism, and they all have it. They're very comfortable. They're not trying to live to not die. They're just living. That's the idea. They're not afraid. They just live, and the way they live indirectly gives them longevity.
It's fascinating, and I want to come back to them, but you just said they're not living afraid, or how did you put it? They're not living to keep themselves from dying. This gets back to this whole medical phenomenon. If we go back to mechanistic medical, the idea today that there's something that's broken, that there's something that has to be fixed, that we're in a war for our health. We're in a war for our survival. We're fighting against to survive. And that's the opposite of what they're doing.
Yes. And I come from a scientific background and worked with many physicians. But at the same time, I think what's happening with medicine now, unfortunately, instead of healthcare, what it's doing is pathology management. Mm-hmm. It's really outstanding with infections. It's outstanding with emergency medicine, outstanding with microsurgery. But once you get that physicality, that mechanical part out of it, and you go to the systemics, it fails miserably in curing anything. It's just a palliative care of keeping you as comfortable as possible with your disease for the rest of your life, unfortunately. And that's how it is. Why? Because they're looking for cures from the inside. They're not looking at the environment. They're looking at consciousness. They're looking at cures from the inside only. And then that's only a part of it. But there's a lot more to us than just being mechanical beings, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually.
Yeah, that's why we're having this talk today. Uh, Going back to 100-year-olds, importance of empathy, what would you say?
Empathy is really important. What I gathered in the causes of health
Yeah.
is really basically looking at what they do.
Yeah.
Good science looks at what works, not what doesn't work. We know a lot about pathology. We know very little about the causes of health. So what I was studying is the causes of health. These are people that have empathy, but they have good limit setting. They're not caretakers. They have what can I do for you? And I'll give you an example that I always use because it was classical. I was interviewing a 102-year-old centenarian, and I said, could I see you Saturday? And he said, sure, of course, we can get together. And I said, could it be Saturday morning at 9? And he said, no, I have tango lessons at 9. Not at 9. I could do it at 2. You see, they don't give up their joy, but that's what empathy is. Empathy is inclusive. Compassion is inclusive. If you don't include yourself in compassion, the Tibetan Buddhists cannot understand how compassion could be non-inclusive. They see it as if you do it non-inclusive, you're just doing it so you can look good or so people will like you. You have to include yourself in the bioinformational field of compassion and empathy, and that's what they do. They have empathy, they have compassion, but they don't let anyone run over their joy. Emergencies, they take care of it, but I'm talking about in general. They're not caretakers. They're people that co-author a resilience. It's really the difference. And what I teach in the books and in my work is that you can learn centenarian consciousness at any time in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are.
So tell us more about centenarian consciousness. I'm very curious about this.
Well, centenarian consciousness is a way of looking at the world. Number one, the present is never too late to make important decisions. And I'll give you examples on each. One of them, 100-year-old, I said, so what's going on? What are your plans? He said, I'm just going to start learning German. That's one. The other one, he has a vegetable garden. I said, what do you think of the garden? I think it's great. Oh, and they're not afraid of acknowledging their greatness. And I'll tell you some more about that. And I said, oh, yeah, it's really beautiful. He said, but wait till you see it in 3 years. So they create a mind-body space beyond the present, and the biology to a certain degree follows. They accept their beauty, their greatness. I was interviewing a 100-year-old woman who's really beautiful. And I said, you know, you're really a beautiful woman. And she said, yes, thank you. I've always been beautiful. Ever since I was a little girl, I was beautiful. See how refreshing that is? But what do I call our cultures teaches pseudo-humbleness? A little girl comes up and says, Mommy, look how beautiful I am. No, darling, you don't say you're beautiful. You wait for people to tell you. And when they tell you, you deny it. How can you build any self-worth that way? And they're called healthy narcissists because they accept their beauty, they accept their greatness, and they thank you for it. They don't say, oh, no, I love your hair. Oh, that I haven't washed it in 3 days. You know, that's how cultures will shape you back into nothingness.
So let's talk about a few of these. First off, having a garden that just wait till you see it in 3 years, that blows away the cultural norm that we are mechanistic beings that wear down. Well, we're just going to wear out. So of course, I'm not going to be able to work on that garden in 3 years. I'm just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker.
That's a great point, and I'll tell you why. Biology, in order to legitimize itself as a science, had to borrow the principles of physics. And physics, Newtonian physics, does well with mechanical things in the body and mechanical things in the bodies of cosmic bodies like planets and so forth. And the biological principles of entropy was borrowed, and entropy says you go from order to disorder. And self-organizing systems don't work that way. Self-organizing systems work better with complexity, which means you go from simple to complex. So as you get older, you get more complex. There is some wear and tear, but most of it is not. You're not your age. You are what you do with your time. Is the way I look at it.
Can you explain more of that? That's brilliant.
So aging is optional. Growing older, you can't do anything about it. What is growing older? The passing of time. What is aging? What you do with time based on what you assimilate from your culture.
What you do with time based on what you assimilate with your culture. In other words, here, let me give you that handicap spot right up front. At this point, you shouldn't have to work as far. Let me carry that for you. It'll make things easier on you. Sit down and relax. I'll take care of it.
Yes. There are countries in Europe that will give you the social services will give you a cane at 55 because eventually you're going to need it.
Oof.
That's a setup for failure. That's a setup for deterioration. And the culture editors have a lot of power, which are people in context with power, like a doctor in a hospital, a priest in a church, and parents at home. They have a lot of power in placebo and nocebo effects to help you or to hurt you. And there's all kinds of information about that. But really, what we need to do as your audience is, okay, what portal am I living now? What portal have I been put into? Am I into the middle age portal, the young adult, or the third age? And you'll see that you'll start living that way, dressing that way, and getting sick that way by following that cultural portal. I asked a centenarian, what is middle age? He says, that's a dumb question. You find out when you die. I don't know what middle age is. So they have a sense of humor, but they don't let you get away with things. They just put you back into your place.
I love it. I've started bicycle racing again. I did it a long time ago at the professional level, and I stopped it for over 20 years, retired from it. I'm racing again. I'm racing against kids who are absolutely kicking my butt, and I'm having a blast, and I'm completely throwing out the concept of what you can do when. In fact,
Yes.
let's go from there. Wouldn't it be great if we could all put ourselves into the portal of the Tarahumara?
Of course, they can run for 200 miles, the Tarahumaras, because they are taught that as you grow older, you become better. And Harvard did a study on their cardiovascular system and found that runners in their 50s have better cardiovascular than the 20s because of the cultural expectations that you create. But they have to run. It's not just thinking. And I'll give you an example of the running, how sad this is. My son's best friend, his father, ran marathons, and he was number 1, number 2, number 3. He's doing a marathon, and he told my son later and his son, he said, I was running, and it was really depressing. These two kids went by. He had premature gray hair, and they said, look at that old guy go. From then on, he stopped. He stopped running. He started developing knee problems, and he looks 20 years old. Just by that statement of look at that old man go.
All right, we've got to go from there. I want to go to causes of health, but since we're going to look at the old man go, we've got to talk about you and Dr. Christian Northrup and like an app that you put on your phone, the experiment that you guys did. I thought it was so cool.
All right. Okay, but here's the science behind it, or the premise behind it. We store information not just in your brain cognitively. We store what the immune system did at the time, what the nervous system did, what the endocrine system did, what the circulatory, all the systems, what they did. It's all stored throughout the body. So with that premise, you can then bring back memories, both good and bad, and it'll have a physiology. You'll be embodying the physiology. So based on that, I developed a method that Chris Northrup is using also with many of her people in her classes and so forth that really works. What you do is you take a picture, you find a picture of yourself 10, 15 years, depending on your age, could be 50 years, but it has to be a time when you felt good about life and you look good. You bring that picture and you put it on your iPhone or you put it on your phone so you can look at it 3 or 4 times a day. You do it for a week. You do a pre-selfie of day 1 and a post-selfie of day 7. And what you do is 3-4 times a day, you look at the picture, you do a contemplative state where you get yourself relaxed, and go back and bring back how you felt at that time and embody it. Embodying is really important. How do I feel that energy? How do I feel the invincibility that I felt? And then for the rest of the day, you act as if you're that age within limits. You're not going to be a marathon runner if you were 20 years ago, but within limits, you live that consciousness. And what you find is within 7 days, there's a change in stress marks, your eyes widen, and all kinds of things start happening when you do that.
So, and it reminds me of another colleague, Dr. Ellen Langer, and the study she did where she put people back in time, so to speak.
Yes.
And how, I don't know if this is a mirror neuron effect or what's going on, but people completely shifted.
Yes, Ellen Langer is a great friend. She's done wonderful, wonderful work at Harvard. She was the first female professor to be tenured at Harvard. Mm-hmm. And what she did is she brought men in their 80s to this place, and she divided them into 2 groups. Here's the difference between living it and talking about the good old days. Look at the physiology difference. One group was told, okay, come here, and you're gonna be here for a few days, And what we want you to do is just reminisce about the good old days. See what you remember from the good old days. And it was in the present setting. The other group was told, we want you to bring a picture with your name tag of you 20 years earlier. And we're going to put you in a place. This is in the 80s, and it was back in the 60s. So you had I Love Lucy. You're going into a time bubble, and you're going to act as if you're that age, and you don't talk about anything beyond a particular year. They did that for a few days. The people that were living it were showing such dramatic changes in what you call, quote, the aging markers. They reversed all of that. So they were doing so well that they brought independent raters, and they reversed the pictures. Picture 5 was changed, and they asked them, what is the difference in age in these people? And they said anywhere from 5 to 8 years. The other people got worse or about the same because they were talking about the good old age, which is reminiscent and lamenting and all that. But here's what happened with the study. And, of course, she does it differently now. 6 to 8 months later, these people were brought back into the bubble. Grandpa, don't carry your bag. I'll carry it for you. No, I'll get it. No, Grandpa. Before they left, they were playing touch football. When they came in, they couldn't even carry their own bags. But they were brought back into the portal. And now Ellen does it differently. She has people teaching them to move on and have mentors and so forth so they can keep whatever therapeutic gains they have.
How do we use that knowledge in our lives today?
Well, first to find out what portal you've been put into. What portal have you been defined? Yeah. And you don't define yourself. They define you indirectly. And also be aware how they're going to get you out of that portal when you get out. Let's say you've been put in the portal of the middle age, and you're dressing middle age. And then you go somewhere and you buy a shirt that looks good on you. You're a Hollister or some shirt that other kids are wearing. And the first thing they're going to say is, do you want to look like a teenager? At your age, you should be thinking about retirement or saving for your retirement. And they put you back. And what you do is you fight and you say, yes, I don't want to look like a teenager. I just want to look ageless. Thank you very much. People ask you your age. Don't tell your age. They'll say, do you have a problem with your age? No, you apparently do. Because I don't have a problem with my age, but I'm not going to define myself by my age. What is it that people first do in relationships? How old are you? Well, I was born in the 20th century. That's it. That's all you need. Because once they peg you, like when you go to the doctor, they need to know your age so they can peg you. Yeah. I train physicians in biocognition, and I teach them, don't ever ask the age until you finish the clinical interview, until you finish the work. You have to ask the age for the insurance and all that, but don't ask so you don't prejudice yourself. I have a friend who's a physician, and he was 80 now, and his knee was hurting. So he went to one of his colleagues and he said, my knee's hurting. I said, I don't know what's going on. He said, well, what do you want at 80? He said, the same thing that my other knee has, which is also 80. You see, it's breaking that because it's either what do you want for your age, or it's stress, or it's genes. That's it. And that's lazy science. That's not proactive science at all.
Thank you. What are some of the other causes of health?
Okay, I'll list them. Righteous anger, 1. Setting emotional limits, 2. Yeah. Forgiveness, 3. Yeah. Seeing yourself in the present and making the present the best time to make decisions. And rather than lamenting, when you lament, you stop and you begin to create what you can do about the lamenting. Lamenting is very bad for your health. It puts you into physiological helplessness. So let's say, God, I wish I would have finished college. And then you go into it and you start reruns. Okay, how do I feel? Always embodied. I feel terrible. My head hurts. Let me breathe into it so it'll pass. I don't try to get it to pass. The mind-body code is you observe it. And then you say, okay, now, do I want to do anything with college? Yes? No? Okay, done. I don't want college, but maybe I want to learn a language. Or I do want to go back to college, or whatever. You do some action, and the lamentation becomes a trigger for you to grow.
It sounds like a very simple formula. Too simple of a formula. Maybe first, awareness. Second, empowerment. Third, action.
Action. And then looking at the co-authors that are going to go against, because they're not ready for your change. Co-authors want to keep you within your limits so they don't have to change.
how do we, for all the listeners listening to this, and we all have co-authors in our lives, in our lives, many of which love us, but I guess it's a conditional love.
Yes.
How do we overcome the, I can't think of another way to put it, the choke collars of our co-authors?
Yes, the emotional vampires. Well, all of this that I'm giving you is deceptively simple, but it has tremendous psychoneuroimmunology and neuropsychology in it. So it took me many years to make it simple. Einstein said, if you can't explain something simple, you don't know what you're talking about. So that to me was my indication. So what happens then is that number one, you use one of the causes of health, setting limits.
Mhm.
You set limits. The second part of setting limits, which is assertiveness, that psychology doesn't talk about, is that I set my limits and I give you permission for you not to like it. And see how you embody when they don't like it.
Yeah.
And gradually you begin to then see that these people have a right to not like it, but not enough of a right to change you. And it's a physiological process you do, never intellectual. It's always embodying and letting it go. So one person will, let me give you an example.
Sure.
You bought that you're bad with directions.
Yeah.
And well, your brother's good with directions, but you're not. So you get the archetype of the bad with directions. And all of a sudden you say, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to see if I'm bad with directions. If I were bad with directions, I couldn't even get home.
Mhm.
So let me challenge that. And you begin to learn about how GPS can help you with directions. You begin to do, and you become very good with directions.
Yeah.
And then you're driving with mom or with a friend or brother, and you say, "Oh, I'm going to show you where we're going." Now remember, you're bad with directions. No, I'm not. I used to be. Not anymore. Let me show you. Well, I don't know if I'm going to trust you. Don't trust me. That's okay. You see, you challenge it and give them permission to not like it. And then you find evidence that says that, yes, I am a good driver. That's how you change the perception. The brain always needs evidence. You can't do affirmations without evidence. It doesn't work. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you do an affirmation of, I'm a good person.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm a good person. I'm a good person. You can say it 1,000 times. It's not going to do anything because there's no evidence embodied. Now, if you go back and you say, I'm a good person. All right. Where's the evidence? Well, 2 weeks ago, I did this and this. Let me embody it. How does that feel? Oh, okay. More evidence, more evidence. And then the next thing you do is, I'm going to create evidence today to show me that I'm a good person. Then the neural maps change. The neural maps change with evidence, not with thoughts. And that's how you create an affirmation.
When you said something, I got goosebumps, so I want to go back to it. How do I embody it?
By embodying means is that how is it manifesting in your body? If I say to you, hey, Michael, I think you're really, really a great guy.
Well,
how is it manifested? What are you feeling? You're feeling the warmth. That's the embodiment. That's saying, I am aware of what my body is doing with what my mind is interpreting. So it becomes mind-body. When it becomes mind-body, it's yours, good and bad. If it's good, you embody it and you allow it to permeate. If it's bad, you observe it like a cloud so it'll go away by itself. That's the mind-body code for it. So you always have to embody it, because if you don't, it's just a cognition. We learn things in clusters. We learn things in our physiology, in our cognition, and you can't just get that cluster out just by intellectually saying, okay, I'm a good person, I'm fine now. That's naive psychology. It doesn't work really well.
Is there an importance in being, in a sense, for your own betterment, a rebel?
Yes. But you want to be a rebel for a wellness cause. Not a rebel for a bad cause. It's like saying, I'll show you, I'm going to do 3 lines of cocaine instead of 4. That kind of stuff. But you want to be you have to be an outlier, better than a rebel. An outlier lives outside of the norm, but in the right side of the norm. So for example, when you go to a doctor, some doctors, not all, will say, look, you have this illness and this is the prognosis. You have 6 months to live. You better get your life in order. That's not only bad science, but that's a nocebo effect. And they'll say, well, but I have to warn the person. No, you don't warn the person with bad statistics. What you do is you say, on the average, this is the prognosis, 6 months. But let's look at the outliers on the right side of the curve. And these people with the same illness you have, they live for 10 years. Let's see what they do, and I'll teach you, mimic what those people did. But you can't do that if you're spending 8 minutes with a patient. So that's the problem.
If you're a patient, if you have an ailment, what do we do?
If you have an ailment, Number one, there's always genetics, of course. There's environment, and there's the fuel that you put in. That's the mechanical. All right, what is it that there's some genetic predisposition, not a sentence. What am I eating? What is my environment? Who are the co-authors around me? And once you work on that, then you ask yourself, what is the wisdom of what's happening now? Not what do I like it or not, but what is the wisdom? And there are two questions you can start asking. One, what could I do, or what would I have to do that I don't want to do if I got rid of the illness? Secondary gains. You don't blame yourself. You didn't cause the illness. You're just coming out of it. So what is it that I would have to do that I don't like to do, and the illness gets me out of it? Totally subconscious. And the other one, which is more subtle and more important, what could I do that I like that I don't feel worthy of having it if I didn't have the illness? Those two questions need to be asked in order to heal, not to be cured. Now, it won't work 100% because people die at some point and people have some terminal illness, but I have seen in many patients some remarkable changes in their lives when they do that, because they, for example, studies that have been done with HIV positive men in San Francisco, the ones that had the most T cells, which are the ones that the virus attacks, were the ones who had forgiven the person who infected them and who made a drastic change in their lives. Important. Those are biocognitive changes. Those are not medical changes.
I love it. And doubling back to genetics and how it affects disease, there is a portal that we've been put into, at least in Western society, that says that our bodies are not strong, that we don't have an innate wisdom in healing. In fact, you may have something. We've got to check for a marker to find if you're broken.
Yes, because many doctors get very anxious when they can't find anything wrong with you. When my mother, who died at 97, would go to the doctor, they would say, I don't know what's going on. What's wrong? Nothing. We just can't find anything wrong with her. That's really good genetics. I said, could it be more than just genetics? Because, her dad died when he was 60. So what is the genetics? I don't get it. But getting back to your question, what you do is you have propensities. DNA doesn't change. What changes is the propensity of gene expression. The gene expression. So let's say you have diabetes type 2 in the family. Well, everybody in my family is developing the consciousness of helplessness, the tunnel of helplessness. So you say, okay, there's a propensity, not a genetic sentence. What about Uncle Joe, who didn't die of diabetes type 2? He died of old age. How was he different than the rest of the clan? And you will find there the outlier that you need to live like. You get out of the fishbowl, and you'll see that Uncle Joe had a different way of dealing with anger, had a different way he was more positive, he had a sense of humor, and he didn't buy it. Subconsciously, he didn't buy it. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to teach what outliers do subconsciously. I'm going to try to teach it consciously so we can learn it.
Well, I love it. And it's something that the idea of finding an outlier that you can mimic, that you can learn from, that can be your mentor. I'm 50 years of age. I'd like to be active like I was 20 again. Well, here's a 70-year-old who's incredible. Why don't I learn what he's doing or she's doing?
That's right. I just visited a good friend of mine. He invented the pocket gym or the synergetics. He's 88 years old.
Oh, cool.
And I went to see him, and I cooked dinner for him. He lives with his wife, who's 35 years younger, and they've been together for 30 years. And his wife was visiting the family, so we had an opportunity to cook. And I cooked for him and said, okay, look, it's 4:30. In this family, we have bourbon on the rocks. So let's have some bourbon. We went for a walk. Then the next day, we went to a Mexican restaurant. Unstoppable guy. Unstoppable at 88 years old. And I asked him, what kind of illnesses do you have? He said, nothing. I don't even take aspirin. Is it genetics? It's not genetics. It's how he's living. Every time I call him, how are you doing? I couldn't do better because I'd be bored if I were doing better. And he means it. He's not just doing, positive psychology. He really means it. What are you up to? He lives all these things. Well, I'm doing this and this and this. He has meaning in his life. He has a purpose. He's still in love with his wife. His wife is visiting, and she'll call him 2 or 3 times a day like teenagers. So what's going on? What are you doing? They've been together for 30 years. And I asked him, when you married your wife, she was very young and you were much older. what do all those people say? The people that said that it wasn't going to work, what did they say? And he said, I don't know, because they're all dead.
I love
So
it.
those are examples of people who you can admire and you can be inspired with.
There's one that inspires me a lot. That if I need a pick me up, all I have to do is watch him dancing now, not then. Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, look at him. He's in his 90s and he dances like a 20-year-old. So that's an
Absolutely.
example. Dick Van Dyke is a great model to follow.
But before we dive into a few wrap-up questions and a real quick meditation, what's the importance of the color of the wind?
The importance of the color of the wind? Well, that was asked to one of my heroes, Fritz Perls, and who came up with Gestalt therapy. He wasn't a real nice guy, but he was a genius. And a Zen master asked him, "What is the color of the wind?" And he just he blew, and the master said, "Not bad, not bad." So one of the things that I do with Zen koans is I teach Western koans, which is indirectly getting out of that linear mind and beginning to go into the nonlinear mind. And I'll give you an example. It's always examples. How do we create synchronicity? Well, one of the ways to create synchronicity and enjoy life is you do what I call a feed-forward event. You know, feedback. I had to invent feed-forward and borrow it from engineering, which means something else. Feed-forward means that you tonight, with someone that you like, or spouse or parent or partner, you have a great dinner celebrating something that's going to happen in the future.
Oh, I love it.
Feed forward. And then what you do is you become aware for the next few days of what you celebrated. And you'll have a selective perception and will think, oh, so this is what I celebrated. I can celebrate it again. So it's a string of celebrations. Synchronicity comes in because it's a nonlinear process that you're doing. You're creating what's called prolepsis, which is something in the present with pregnant meaning that will be expressed in the future. What are examples? With Michelangelo, when he drew helicopters, when the Incas, not the Incas, the Mayans had little wheels for their toys, but didn't transfer it to actually use the wheel to work. Those are prolepsis, things that are not able to be expressed in time yet. But with feed forward, you force a situation and it becomes expressed.
I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but I'm going to go there. What does that have to do with law of attraction?
I don't think that we attract anything. What we do is we create a selective perception of things that are available. So what we attract is what we find based on the sense of worthiness that we have. And you could test it very easily. You could do a study where you could put 100 people in one room to attract everything, and another people in another place where they actually take action and do things, and who's going to get things? Who's going to get it?
Absolutely.
So the law of attraction is nice. It's motivating, and it's kind of a nice feeling because you feel some connection and so forth. But there's something more important than the law of attraction, which is what do I want to engage? And if I feel that I want to engage it and I'm not worthy on it, how can I build my validation and my worthiness so I can get the things that I want? And one of the things that I teach is for people to get out of the merit system. You deserve this, you deserve that. To get into the nature that my nature is to have abundance of health, wealth, and love. Now, some people will say, yeah, but if you don't have the merit system, then nobody will work. No, because we also have not only that nature, but we have the nature of being proactive and meaning. And an example, Einstein and Planck and all the other geniuses that left during the Nazis, one of the big companies, I don't know if it was GE or one of the big companies, said, look, we're going to set up this lab for you. We're going to pay you $40,000. In those days, it was a lot of money. And you don't have to do anything. You want to come into work? Come into work. You don't? You don't. These people, they're not going to sit around. That year, they had more patents than in the history of the company. So you see, those are examples of the nature of the individual. You can't do it with everyone. You can't do it with a sociopath because they'll abuse you. But most normal people, it works. It's good. So I would say instead of attracting anything, seek it out and bring your level of worthiness so you can feel worthy of whatever is coming to you.
So
you don't manifest anything. You just bring it close to you.
On that note, I want to ask for a homework question. I want to take my coaching hat, put it on you. This has been phenomenal, Mario. This has been just just phenomenal. I'm really enjoying this. What one homework assignment would you give people? And let's maybe we make it around worthiness, something that in the West we have incredible difficulty with.
Yes. Well, yeah, worthiness would be good because worthiness has to do with health. It has to do with the expectations that you have in life.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the partners that you choose and everything. The amount of money that you allow yourself to receive. People who get the lottery, win the lottery, they say they keep it for 18 months because of the unworthiness or because they don't know how to deal with it. You have to learn joy. We can be happy, but we have to learn joy. Joy is learned. Babies aren't born joyful. They're born with happy potential, but joy is very complex. So what do you do with what do you do with worthiness? Self-esteem is an American psychology invention. Not every culture has a self-esteem thing. But worthiness, validation, there are 3 ways that you can validate, and this will be the homework. First, you look at your valuation self-esteem, which is how much do I value myself to receive good things without creating conflict? Valuation, self-esteem. And I'll show you how to go up and down with each. Okay. The second one has to do with competence. How good am I at what I do? And the third has to do with affiliation. Nobody talks about that. Who are the selective people that I can have in my life to share my joy? Those 3 need to be in balance. How do you bring them up and down? Yeah. The first one, very easy. They're all very easy because it's complexity made into simple. It goes up, the valuation self-esteem goes up when you keep self-caring commitments. It goes down when you break them. That's simple. Cool. Self-caring commitments, you keep them, it goes up. You break them, it goes down. If you have a friend that you can't count on, the valuation of that friend goes down. That's what we do to ourselves. So that's how you go up and how you go down. Competence, very simple. I'm a father, I'm a psychologist, I'm a friend, whatever. How can I be better at what I do? Competence, self-esteem goes up if you're learning, like what the Japanese call the kaizen, small amounts of improvement. It goes down by stagnation. If you go to a professional who says, oh, no, I haven't been to a workshop in 20 years, don't go there because they're spinning what they learned 20 years ago. So it goes up with learning. It goes down with stagnation. The brain deteriorates with stagnation. And the third, affiliation, which is really important, it goes up when you increase the quality of the relationships that you have. It goes down when you decrease the quality or you bring up the quantity without quality. It goes down. And you have to have all 3. That's what you do with valuation.
Brilliant. So from there, what advice, Jessica, my wife, she's the producer, she always wants me to ask advice for parents to help their kids today.
By helping, depending on the age, of course, the developmental age, by living by example. You notice how a kid, let's say a 3-year-old will fall and they'll look at mommy to see if they have to cry or not. Or if the kid is at the mall and you say, Johnny, come on, 1, 2. What Johnny's learning is that Johnny has 3 tries before he has to come home. Yeah. So what you do is you pay attention to what you're saying and what you're doing, number 1. And number 2 is you want to teach him by Socratic method. Mm-hmm. Let's say, especially adolescents who don't like to be told what to do. Adolescents, you give them options. Younger, you discover. A 5-year-old drops a glass of milk, spills milk on the floor. What do? You go up without getting all excited. What happened? Just, matter of fact, what happened? Oh, it starts crying. What does that mean? What happened? The milk. So what do we do? Question, Socratic, question. What do we do? I don't know. Well, what do you think if we could clean it? What could happen? Well, how do I do it? Okay, I'm going to help you clean it. Let's clean it. And then after we clean it, I'm going to tell you a story. Now, behavior modification, people will say, no, you're reinforcing the behavior. No, you're reinforcing creativity. What happens if you shouldn't do that? What are you teaching is every time that I do something wrong, fear needs to come in. Every time that another thing you don't want to do, never reinforce with a subtle punishment. Hey, look, mommy, I got a B in geography. Oh, that's really nice, but you could have gotten an A. You kill it. You do shaping. You got a B. That's wonderful. What else did you do? I got a C in Spanish. Really? Okay, now, and I got an F in English. Okay, so how did you work on that B? I'm fascinated how you got that B. You're shaping behavior of success. rather than behavior of punishment. I teach that to CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. That process of, because they do the same thing to their employees. They shame them. There's a company that I won't mention the name. They shame or they admire people. In one of the quote motivational meetings, a guy had a heart attack and died.
Oh gosh.
Because it's terrible. You don't motivate, you inspire. Motivation is a manipulation. You want to inspire people.
Woohoo! On that note, what brings you the greatest happiness or inspires you the most?
When I find meaning, when I can make somebody feel good, and when someone admires me so I can admire them back. Admiration is real important in relationships. Centenarians admire each other, but it's not narcissistic. Admire me because I'm so wonderful. I want to be admired so I can admire you. And admiration means mimicking. It means wanting to do like that person. That's what I think is really important. That's what turns me on.
Woohoo! So from there, where can people go to find out more and to find your brilliant book?
They can. Amazon has it, and Hay House has it, and then they can go to my website and just Google Biocognitive Science, and the website is very simple: biocognitive.com. They can go there and all kinds of information, a lot of free stuff there, and books, of course.
Fantastic. So if you didn't catch biocognitive.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com, and we'll get you over to biocognitive.com. So any last words of wisdom before we dive into a brief meditation?
Well, I think the most important thing is don't buy what your culture tells you are your boundaries. Boundaries are very rigid. See them as horizons that are expandable. And just that alone, in every part of your life, you'll see some kinds of changes that will happen.
Woohoo! Okay, on that note, do you have time for a brief meditation?
Yes. What we'll do is that nothing that you do can go well unless you have a terrain of safety. So I'm going to do a meditation for safety. It's called the portal of safety.
Beautiful.
Okay. So what we do is you can do any kind of contemplative relaxation, whatever. But the main thing is that you close your eyes.
Unless you're driving, do this later.
And that's right. Not as you're driving, and not at work, and not with machinery. When you give yourself time for yourself. So when you close your eyes, you make two commitments. One is that when I close my eyes, I'm going inward. I'm going to explore my inner world. And two, very important, I'm worth the time that I'm taking for myself. And then there are three parts of the body that you can relax, and the rest you let the body do it itself. First, the shoulders, you drop them and get rid of all the excess weight that you carry, emotional weight. It's lifting. Atlas lifting the world that it's carrying. Second, between your teeth, unclench your teeth, and then your jaw relaxes. That causes tension. And what you want to do is unclench your teeth. And the third is your eyelids. You drop your eyelids and let them fall softly over your eyes. And just breathe normally. You don't have to do anything major. This is a simple process, but very powerful technique. So what you go to your stomach, and you go to your legs all the way down to your feet. And notice how your feet are touching the ground there, and they're grounded. You're rooted. And then you go to the abdominal area, and you say these three words or mantras. First, safety. And you go to your stomach. You embody the safety. When you say safety, safety is a word. You take it to your body. How does safety feel in my stomach? And you keep going, safety, safety. And you can do it as long as you want. It's good to do it in the morning so you don't dump the dreams of the night into the day. And at night so you don't dump the day into the dreams. And you keep going, safety, safety. Then the next mantra is, I am safety. You're owning your safety. I am safety. And you go, I am safety. I am safety. And always embody it. Take it to the stomach to see what the stomach is doing. That's the area of safety. I am safety. And you do this as many times as you want. I am safety. You're owning it. I am safety. And the third, which is very important, is I am safe wherever I go. You take safety with you. I am safe wherever I go. Or I create safety wherever I go, whichever fits better for you. And you repeat that, I'm safe wherever I go. I take safety with me. And you do that as long as you want. And then when you do it for a period of time and you're ready to come back, what you do is you count from 1 to 5, which I'm going to do. And then, very important, when you open your eyes, you want to go into immediate mindfulness to get back into the present. And the way to do mindfulness is by finding something new in the environment, novelty. Mindfulness is novelty. So look around and see if you notice a spot or something new that you see. The moment that you tune into that, you're in complete mindfulness. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you open your eyes, look around and find novelty in your environment. Any little spot on the wall, something on your shirt. The moment that you discover novelty, you are in mindfulness. And that's what brings you back into the present.
I'm looking at the image behind you and at the blush on his face, particularly on the left side of his face.
Perfect. That's great. And I'm looking at your Ralph Lauren emblem on your shirt.
Yep.
So that's it. But that's the way to create mindfulness. You don't have to go to Nepal to a cave. Mm-hmm. Ellen Langer and I believe we have a different way of looking at mindfulness. You can do but if you're doing mindfulness, for example, when you're meditating, all you're aware of is the internal. But when you do mindfulness by finding novelty, all of you goes into complete mindfulness. Novelty there, novelty there. Also, when you find a mistake, that's also mindfulness. It's really been a pleasure. Really, you're a great guy. Very enjoyable.
It's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed this, and I believe we hit the fun factor today.
Perfect. So I'm around anytime you want to follow up. We'll do it. I love doing positive shows like yours that are based on substance. So I congratulate you on your work, and I admire your work.
Thank you, and it goes both ways, and I admire your work. And there are so many, each one of these things could have been blown out into an interview on its own, so I have to go back and listen. Everybody's going to need to go back and listen. And I really enjoyed it's such a refreshing and important and different way of looking at things.
Thank you. That's what I enjoy the most, finding the novelty in the work that I do. So stay well and enjoy. And tell your wife how wonderful you are. And don't stop there and say, wait a minute, but now I'm going to tell you how wonderful you are.
Ooh, I love it. That admiration is going to go a long, long way. So thank you.
I'll give you an example before we go, because this is really a good example too. They have what George Solomon called healthy narcissism. Mm-hmm. And I went to Cuba to study some centenarians, and this 102-year-old man, after I interviewed him, they gave him a little cocktail party. And he walks up to me and he says, have you noticed how the women are looking at me? That's narcissistic, but look at the inclusive. And he said, but have you noticed how beautiful they are? He brings them into his narcissism. They all do that. It's not the sociopath will say, look how they're looking at me. How can I manipulate them? What he's saying is, I'm going to share my beauty with their beauty. So he sees their beauty, and they think that everybody loves them, although they don't. But it's better to believe that you're loved than to not believe it immunologically. So that's a great thing. When they say, look at all these people, how they're looking at me, but look how beautiful they are. Look how intelligent they are. It's a co-authoring of greatness.
I love it.
So anyway, well, listen, have a wonderful day, and it's my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed the work we did.
It goes both ways. So got to crank it up for the finish. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the mind, body, self, and begin freeing yourself and admiring somebody else and yourself today. And shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Mario.
My pleasure. Bye-bye, my friend. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!